We're going to go ahead and start inking the characters now. So the main thing here is that we think about the difference. So with a lot of the technical kind of stuff, everything was a lot more straight lines. There's some tapered lines, but not much, and there's definitely not a whole lot of curved lines. So that's kind of the neat thing about the contrasting elements of something techie or computer generated, and then with the the human characters and cloth and things like that, you're going to use a lot more curved lines, a lot more line variation as far as weight and overlaps and things like that. So I'm just going to kind of start inking over this, and I'm going to be very at ease with throwing in weighted lines. I feel like it adds a lot more character and helps tell the story. So again, the line variation is so important, from the background elements to the character. You see, trying to get these very tapered lines. You'll occasionally see me throw in little bits of rendering that's not really there, just because it's more of a style choice. It's just more of like working on the fly, which I think is another important thing to practice, so that you're constantly getting the best out of your work. You're not just simply going over what you see, but figuring out better ways to refine your work as you go. Because inking is, another artistic decision. It's not just simply going over what's there. So, and you see, I've got some pretty messy lines that I need to clean up as I do this. So I'm trying to take that opportunity to do that as I do go over the work. So the thing is, like, adding little bits of depth. So for instance, this part of the shirt, it just looked kind of flat against the breastplate here. So what I'm doing is adding just that little bit of raised area, just to show that it is a material. Same thing with the arms. I can get this line right. Same thing with the arms here. Instead of bringing that line even to the top, it's probably easy to say, well, this line connects right here to there. And if you do that, if you put the next line too close, like for instance, if you just went like this, then the material all of a sudden doesn't look real. Well, I don't know that it looks real anyways, right? It's a comic, but you want to show that little bit of separation. Just that little shift in line work makes a big difference. So it's paying attention to those little details that help you to, illustrate materials that read like they've got some depth there. Okay, so now with the forearm, this is a little bit more of a loose, almost animated style. So I can get away with, some kind of thicker lines and some, some anatomy that's not entirely correct, but I try to get it to look as good as I can as I produce this. So same thing, like right here, I can add this little bit of edging, so it almost looks like the material has raised area there, or a seam. So little overlaps for the folds. You see some of it is just thrown in there. It's not all, not every line has to make sense, I guess. I mean, it's nice if it does, and if it's a distraction, then get it out of there, but I just feel like some lines can just be because you think they look cool or because you want them in there. And we call that style. So you see these fingers are pretty animated. Just paying attention to certain things, like trying to make sure they taper a little bit. I feel like the middle finger is too consistently wide. So I'll kind of nudge this line over as I ink it and try to get a little bit more point to the fingertip. I noticed too for the fingernails, I just made sure to use a little bit thinner line. Not a significant difference, but enough of a difference so that it reads a little bit better than if I use the same width line for the outline of the arm and the fingernails. Then it would it just wouldn't have as wouldn't read like a detail. It would read like a consistent line. But when you shift them from, you know, one being thicker, one being thinner, it basically gives it a hierarchy. And that's what you're looking for. You want to help explain the story to the viewer in every way that you can, and thick to thin lines and different rendering types, all those things kind of convey that. So lines can tell a story basically. So curves are a bit tougher for me. One of the things I might need to do is rotate the screen. So I'll generally practice a curve like this a couple times. You see I'm going in the opposite direction now. But if I can't get it, I will rotate the screen to something that feels a little more comfortable. And I will also feather the line like I did my cross hatching. And then ultimately, if I can't get it right, I'll do one of two things. I will either draw it on a new layer to get it right, or I can use the circular tools here and I'll get something very, very perfect, but a little too perfect. So, okay, so now for the character's face, which really I would probably normally start here because it's always the most important part of the character. But I actually wanted to warm up on the other part of the character and finish here because this would be, again, the most important part of the character. So I like to warm up my my hand for whatever type of rendering I'm doing. Sometimes I'll even illustrate a face off to the side on a different sheet just to really know that I'm kind of in the zone for faces. For me personally, I feel like faces are probably the most difficult to get right, and I definitely have to practice them all the time. So I can really get out of the zone in a sense for illustrating faces well. Even inking them, it's the same kind of thing for me. It's something about, you know, if I don't draw faces for a while, which is never too long of a while since I use my pictures to tell a story, and you can't really tell a story without faces, but there are times when I might be practicing other areas of the work more, and then all of a sudden I come back to faces and they feel a little awkward. So if that happens to you, just take time to practice and study. Don't let it bother you. It happens to I've read about a lot of artists, you know, experiencing things like that. It happens to all of us. So again, just kind of playing around with these lines, different taper. I want to get that expression of, you know, fear or, you know, kind of surprise. Simplified version of an ear. You see I'm not really worrying too much about detailing that. And then for the hair, it's just really these kind of ribbon-like shapes. So sometimes I'll even use a different layer just to focus on the hair. But the main thing that I tend to do here is a quick sweeping pull. I usually will get a better representation of this if I do that. You see I'm just kind of going right to the point or tip of the hair and then trying to connect those. Something like that. And since I picture this character having lighter hair, I let I keep the rendering light. So if this was a character with dark hair, I would fill this in more. And then maybe this glare line right here would be light. But since it's more like what I would picture blonde hair, light hair, this glare line will still be here, but it's not going to be filled in to the edge of it. Just going to be here for representation for the coloring process. So that's just the way I render different colors. So whenever the color is darker, then I'm going to fill in more black. And whenever it's lighter, I'm going to use more weighted line work and let that kind of tell the story. So a heavier line on the back of the hair here to, again, kind of define the perimeter shape. Go ahead and rotate this by holding R. And with hair, I feel like you need to get these little flips at the end to make it feel softer, to make it feel, like it's flipping and rotating around. If they all just come off to a straight point like this, it's going to feel very sharp and stiff. So what I try to do is go past what I have here and then add these little curves as I finish the work. Even if it's ever so slight, it just kind of helps. So again, a little heavier line weight up here. Little flip of hair right here. You see I do a lot of this Command Z going back until I get the look that I want. Sometimes I get an accidental shape and it looks better than what I expected. And other times I'm just kind of fighting to find the look that I was after. So again, kind of a thicker line to the back, a couple thinner lines on the inside. And you see I'm adding little bits of line work and texture as I pass through this area. Doesn't all have to be exactly what was there in the sketch. I'm going to go ahead and hit Command E to merge this in. I'm going to add a new layer, and I just want to show you if this is tricky for you to get these kind of curves. Again, use layers to your advantage as much and as often as you need to. Just merge them together as you complete the work. Let's see, it becomes a little bit easier for me to focus on this and get these curves in because I'm not worried about them flowing into the other shape of hair. It's still not a big deal because it's pretty easy to erase these back, but I just want to show anybody that's a little bit more of a novice that little things like that can alleviate your your anxiety for this type of work. So something like that, double click here. Yeah, and I think that's good. So just like that, well, minus the side patch, we'll get that filled in. We've got this character inked, so pretty easy to do. We're going to go ahead and move on to the other character now. And it's kind of the same process. A little bit more angles whenever illustrating the male character. But like I said, for the most part, it's an identical process. So let's get this little moon shape or Saturn shape in there. See, I struggle with circles. There we go. And just like that, we got it. So now let's head over to the next lesson and ink the other character.